Our Old Testament reading for this morning completes the cycle of Elijah and now Elisha readings that we have been doing this summer as we hear the story of Naaman the Aramean or the Syrian. Listen for what the Spirit may speak to us through these words. Naaman, commander of the army of the king of Aram, was a great man and in high favor with his master, because by him Yahweh had given victory to Aram. The man, though a mighty warrior, suffered from leprosy. Now the Arameans, on one of their raids, had taken a young girl captive from the land of Israel, and she served Naaman's wife. She said to her mistress, "If only my lord were with the prophet who is in Samaria, he would cure him of his leprosy." So Naaman went in and told his lord just what the girl from the land of Israel had said. And the king of Aram said, "Go then, and I will send along a letter to the king of Israel." He went, taking with him 10 talents of silver, 6,000 shekels of gold, and 10 sets of garments. He brought the letter to the king of Israel, which read, "When this letter reaches you, know that I have sent to you my servant Naaman, that you may cure him of his leprosy." When the king of Israel read the letter, he tore his clothes and said, "Am I God to give life or death, that this man sends word to me to cure a man of his leprosy? Just look and see how he is trying to pick a quarrel with me." But when Elisha, the man of God, heard that the king of Israel had torn his clothes, he sent a message to the king. "Why have you torn your clothes? Let him come to me, that he may learn that there is a prophet in Israel." So Naaman came with his horses and chariots and halted at the entrance of Elisha's house. Elisha sent a messenger to him, saying, "Go, wash in the Jordan 7 times, and your flesh shall be restored, and you shall be clean." But Naaman became angry and went away, saying, "I thought for me he would surely come out and stand and call on the name of Yahweh his God, and would wave his hand over the spot and cure the leprosy. Are not the Abana and the Pharpar, the rivers of Damascus, better than all the waters of Israel? Could I not wash in them and be clean?" He turned and went away in a rage. But his servants approached him and said to him, "Father, if the prophet had commanded you to do something difficult, would you have not done it? How much more when all he said to you was, 'Wash and be clean'?" So he went down and immersed himself 7 times in the Jordan, according to the word of the man of God. His flesh was restored like the flesh of a young boy, and he was clean. The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Our family used to have a dog, a Cardigan Welsh Corgi named Fred. Cardigans are the ones that have tails. They're a bit larger, a bit heavier than the better-known Pembroke variety, but still Fred was only, less than a foot tall at the shoulder. Fred had the best disposition of any dog I've ever known. He was always happy, he loved everyone, and he didn't have a mean bone in his body. Nevertheless, at some point, he decided that one of his jobs was to make like a fierce guard dog when the mail arrived at the front door. Now, he sounded like a much bigger dog, and if you didn't know him, or you couldn't see him, you might have concluded he was a threat, but to us, and to the mail carrier who did know him, it was quite comical. If the front door was open and only the glass storm door separated Fred from the mail carrier, she might well say, "Hi, Fred," and he would wag his tail. It was right ridiculous, but there was no stopping it. It's not like you can reason with a dog and explain to him how ridiculous he looks. It was instinct, after all. He was protecting his home, going into full aggression mode, hair standing up on the back of his neck so that he was 11 inches tall rather than 10 and a half. He was simply wired to act that way. Now, we humans are much less instinctive than Fred. We can look at our behavior and we can modify it if it seems not to be helpful. But that's not to say we don't have some deeply ingrained patterns of how we respond to things around us, and those get even more instinctive when we feel threatened or angry. At such times, we are prone to fight or flight type responses, and if we choose not to flee, then the fight response means some sort of application of power or force. It might be physical, verbal, military. It might involve intimidation or threat, like Fred with the mail carrier. But whatever form it takes, most all of us have some deeply ingrained assumptions about how power and force work. And you can see such assumptions at work in the reading of Naaman, the Syrian commander with leprosy. When Naaman discovers that there is someone in Israel who might heal him, well, he naturally assumes that such great power must be associated with people with great power. It has to belong to those with might and influence. And so he goes to his king, who provides him with a letter of introduction, and he takes great piles of gifts in order to get this amazing power to heal. But of course, the king of Israel knows nothing about curing people of leprosy, although he knows all about power and threat and intimidation. And he's beside himself. He tears his clothes and screams at his advisors that Naaman is trying to provoke an international incident. Clearly, he's going to use this as a pretense for Aram attacking Israel. And only Elisha's intervention prevents the king from going into full fight or flight mode. And so Naaman is now redirected to the house of the prophet. But Naaman is still caught up in the ways of power and prestige and influence, which the reading reminds us of as it announces his grand arrival with horses and chariots. Yet Elisha does not even come out to meet him. It's no way to treat someone who's powerful and important. But Elijah simply sends a messenger who says, "Go wash 7 times in the Jordan and you'll be healed." And now it's Naaman's turn to act instinctively. He becomes angry and fumes at this slight by the prophet. He's in a rage. And who knows what he might have done, except that his servants calm him down. Now, when Naaman flies off the handle at the insulting disrespect given him by the prophet, he not only falls into those fight or flight patterns, but he also assumes that God's power looks very much like human power. He assumes that any legitimate divine healing would involve some grandiose gestures where the prophet invoked the awesome power of his God. Clearly, it would be something more than washing in some muddy river. Clearly, this prophet knew nothing about awe-inspiring divine power. Did you notice during the reading that the people that move this story towards a good ending are all people outside the halls of power? Elisha knows all about the power of God, but he's not necessarily appreciated in the royal court. And the other prime movers in the story are Naaman's servants and an Israelite slave girl, the very epitome of powerlessness. And yet Naaman's view of divine power is still shared by many of us today. It's one of the reasons people still struggle to make sense of the cross. It's one of the reasons we struggle to embrace the Apostle Paul's insistence that the crucified Christ is the very pinnacle of God's wisdom and God's power. There's an old joke about a devastating flood that threatened a community. Calls went out on TV and the radio to evacuate, but one man did not leave. He said, "I'm a Christian. I trust in God. God will protect me." As the waters rose, a levee broke, and crews rushed in to make sure everyone had evacuated. Navigating the streets by boat, they found that one man who was still there, and they begged him to get in the boat with them. But he said, "I'm a Christian. I trust in God. God will protect me." Finally, as the waters rose high enough, the man was forced onto the roof of his house. And just then, a helicopter appeared. They lowered a basket to the man and motioned for him to get in, but he refused, and he yelled up at them, "I'm a Christian. I trust in God. God will protect me." Moments later, the man was washed to his death. And when he met his Maker, he demanded to know what had happened. "I trusted you. Why did you not help me?" God incredulously responded, "I sent you warnings on the TV and the radio. I sent a boat to take you to safety. I even sent a helicopter to rescue you. For heaven's sakes, man, what the heck is wrong with you?" The story of Naaman and the story of Jesus defy Enlightenment notions of God as divine clockmaker who creates the world, sets things in order, winds it up, and walks away. The Bible insists on a God who is intimately involved in the workings of the world and in our lives, who longs to lead us into more full and genuine human life, who longs to show us the way to a more humane world. But God's notions of power are not at all like ours. And God acts in ways that defy our assumptions. In servants and slave girls, muddy waters and crotchety old prophets, and in the horrors of a cross. And the story of Jesus insists that God's power is most fully seen in acts of self-sacrificial love. And so we often miss it. A spiritual director once suggested to me that I do a particular form of examine, a practice of prayerfully reflecting on the events of the day at the day's end. She said, ask yourself, where did I meet God today? And she said, where did I miss God today? The second question is often the more helpful. Where did you meet God? Where did you miss God? May you meet God today in worship, in word and sacrament, in the prayers and the breaking of the bread, and in all those other surprising, not our ways, that God comes to us. All praise and glory to the God who does come to us in the man from Nazareth. Thanks be to God.